The $50 Miracle. The Legend of Carl and Ashes, Part 1 of a 4. The air at the Tri-County Livestock Auction was thick with the smells of hay dust, nervous sweat, and the pungent, unmistakable odor of regret. It was a cold, wet regret that seemed to cling to the worn leather of the bidders' jackets, the low, mournful sounds of the animals, and the empty, echoing spaces in the back rows of the arena. This wasn't a show sale. This was the brutal, unromantic end of the line, the place where lives deemed too old, too slow, or too broken were liquidated. Carl, our Carl, the one with the kind eyes that held a permanent sadness, and the hands that had done 60 years of honest, callus-forming work, stood by the railing. His usual checkered shirt, though clean and carefully pressed by his own hand, felt thin beneath his worn denim overalls, offering little warmth against the chill that seemed to emanate not from the outside, but from a constant internal emptiness since his wife, Clara, had left him. He wasn't there to buy. His old, loyal working horse, Betsy, had died 6 months prior, leaving a vacant space in the stall and an even deeper silence on his 150-acre farm. Carl often found himself standing in the center of the yard, listening to the crushing silence, a silence so loud it felt like a personal accusation. He was at the auction simply to watch, to remember, and perhaps to feel a little less alone among the shared chaos of broken destinies. Then, they brought her out. She was a mare, a ghostly gray color, a true dapple gray that should have been magnificent, a silvery vision. But instead, she looked like a faded, tear-stained photograph of a horse. Her head hung low, an attitude of profound surrender. Her ribs showed like cruel, thin ridges under skin stretched taut with neglect, and her once proud mane was a tangled mess of burrs, mud, and straw. The most damning feature, the one that elicited sighs of immediate dismissal from the few remaining buyers, was her left hind leg. It dragged and swung slightly with a permanent, crippling hitch, a visual testament to a broken past and a promise of future expenses. The auctioneer, a heavy-set man named Bob, with a voice like gravel and, Carl suspected, a heart to match, didn't even bother with a proper sales pitch. He just wanted her gone. Next up, Lot 17, they call her Ashes, registered thoroughbred lines, maybe 15 hands, probably 10 or 11 years old. Been standing in a field for 2 years. Owner selling off assets. She's lame, she's thin, and she's got a mean look in her eye. Starting bid, let's say $1. Come on, folks, $1 for the feed bill alone. Silence. The kind of silence that feels heavy and judgmental. No one raised a paddle. Not the kill buyer, who usually had a morbid appetite for even the most decrepit animals. Not the rescue groups, who had already filled their trailers and their budgets with the merely unwanted. This mare was truly rejected. She stood perfectly still, but Carl could see her flank and chest trembling slightly. It wasn't just physical fear. It was a profound, soul-deep humiliation that resonated with the shame Carl felt sometimes when he realized how utterly directionless his life had become without Clara. Bob sighed, leaning into the microphone, his professionalism failing under the weight of the mare's worthlessness. 50 cents. Do I hear 50 cents? Anything at all? Or we load her out with the rest for the long haul to the rendering plant. Come on, folks, $50, 50 cents. The price of an ancient gumball. A meaningless, worthless price tag on a once magnificent life. Carl's heart twisted violently in his chest, a cold, hard squeeze that felt like grief mixed with pure, blinding outrage. He looked at Ashes, and in that precise moment, she suddenly lifted her head, her gaze sweeping the crowded faces until it landed and locked onto Carl's. In that brief, agonizing connection, through the grime and the sadness, he saw it. Not meanness, but a raging, terrified fire deep in her dark eyes. A plea, a single, desperate request for one chance, no matter how small. Carl's hand shot up, his fingers stiff and trembling, before his brain could form a protest or register the sheer folly of the action. He had to clear his throat to speak the impossible amount, the word feeling thick and foreign on his tongue. 50 cents. A ripple of low, cruel laughter spread through the small crowd. Bob paused, startled that anyone would even bother to claim this life. 50 cents to the old man in the overalls. Sold to lot 22. Congratulations, farmer. You just bought yourself a future coffin. The transaction was ludicrous. Carl reached into the deep pocket of his overalls and pulled out 2 tarnished quarters, dropping them heavily onto the clerk's desk. As the heavy metal gate clanked shut behind Ashes, the auctioneer's final, condescending words echoed in the cavernous barn, sealing the ridiculousness of the moment. 50 cents? Cheapest horse we've sold all year. Carl ignored the snickers, the pity, and the stares. He had bought a life, and in doing so, he had, unknowingly, bought his own redemption. The cold emptiness in his chest had been replaced by a small, terrified, demanding sense of responsibility. Getting Ashes home was a silent, grueling affair. She was too exhausted to fight, but she refused to be led, standing rigidly whenever Carl pulled on the rope. Carl spent an hour talking to her, coaxing her onto the old trailer with a bucket of sweet feed, his voice low and constant. "It's all right, girl. No whips here, just a quiet barn, and maybe some good alfalfa." He put her in the big pasture next to the house, the pasture where Betsy used to graze, a silent, lonely field surrounded by a familiar wooden fence. For 3 days, Ashes stood in the farthest corner, her back to the barn, her head low. She wouldn't look at Carl. She wouldn't touch the fresh hay he put out, only drinking water when he wasn't watching. The silence between them was not peaceful. It was heavy, weighted with all the broken promises, the past abuses, and the profound trauma she had endured. Carl could feel the palpable, wall-like barrier of her mistrust. Carl was starting to feel the heavy weight of his decision. His neighbor, Jed, the gruff younger man who ran a successful feed store and had inherited his father's blunt, no-nonsense manner, stopped by with a delivery and just shook his head, leaning against his pickup truck. "Carl, with all due respect, what in the Sam Hill did you buy? I saw her at the sale. That mare's got the look of a horse that's given up. She's going to cost you a fortune in vet bills, and she'll just die on your pasture. You can't fix that kind of broken." "Maybe she just needs to know she's safe, Jed," Carl replied, his gaze distant, fixed on the distant, unmoving gray shape. "Safe ain't paying the bills, Carl. That leg will never hold, and you'll be dumping money into a hole you can't climb out of." Jed drove off, his practical words hanging in the air like exhaust smoke, stinging Carl with the loneliness of his own failing farm and his inability to make a sound financial choice. But Carl just looked at his hands, hands that had built stone walls, repaired machinery, delivered calves, and held Clara's hand until the very end. They were hands that knew how to mend things, not quickly or perfectly, but persistently and gently. He decided to wait. Patience was all he had left. On the 4th morning, Carl sat down on an overturned galvanized bucket just inside the fence, about 30 feet from where Ashes was pressed against the rail. He didn't bring feed. He didn't look at her. He didn't make a sound of demand. He just started humming. It was an old Irish ballad Clara used to sing, one about a traveler finding a forgotten path through the mist, a song he hadn't had the heart to sing since her funeral. He hummed for an hour, focusing on the simple, repetitive melody. Then he got up, replaced the bucket, and walked back to the house. He did the same thing every single day for the next week. Hummed. Left. No demands. On the 7th day of this silent ritual, Carl was humming the part about the mossy stone and the winding river when he heard a tiny, almost imperceptible noise, a soft shifting of hooves on the dry dirt. He stopped the tune instantly. Ashes had taken 2 hesitant steps closer. Her head was still low, but she was listening, her ears angled slightly forward, trying to discern the meaning of this gentle, non-threatening sound. A wave of warmth, pure, unadulterated hope, the first he had felt since Clara's passing, flooded Carl's chest, melting some of the icy grief he carried. He didn't move. He just started humming again, a little louder this time, his voice slightly raw with emotion. When he finished the verse, Ashes was standing right at the fence, her head drooping over the top rail, watching him with those deep, dark, intelligent eyes. Tears welled up in Carl's eyes, burning against the cold air. It wasn't just a horse finally moving. It was a soul making a choice to connect. A fragile thread of trust had been spun. He reached out his hand slowly, palm up, and she flinched violently, pulling back instantly. Too soon, Carl. Too soon. He pulled his hand back quickly and just smiled, a gentle, understanding smile, and resumed his humming. It was another week before Carl was finally able to touch her. He had been sitting there, reading an old book of Clara's poetry aloud, his voice steady and low. Ashes had crept closer, her face now resting on the top rail. Carl closed the book and, without looking at her, began to gently scratch the weathered wood of the fence post. Slowly, tentatively, she pushed her dusty forehead toward his hand. He waited until he felt the soft hairs brush his knuckles. Then he let his fingers drift over her skin, a soft, tentative rub between the eyes. She didn't pull away. She leaned into it. That day, he decided to clean the mud and burrs from her coat, a slow, gentle process that took hours. As he worked the curry comb down her shoulder, he saw something under the caked-on filth, a faded, almost invisible brand on her neck. It was a complex, looping mark he didn't recognize, etched by a branding iron that had clearly been applied with expertise and expense. He took a photo on his old flip phone, sent it to an old friend who worked at the State Equine Association, and forgot about it, assuming it was just a long-forgotten ranch mark. The next day, Carl's daughter, Sarah, arrived unannounced. Sarah, a high-powered accountant in the city, was Clara's spitting image. Beautiful, practical, and constantly worried about her aging, solitary father. She had brought along her daughter, Carl's 12-year-old granddaughter, Lily. Lily was a delicate, reserved girl, shy and often anxious, who spent most of her time with her nose buried in fantasy novels, seeking refuge from the confusing real world. "Daddy, I saw the trailer." "Jed called me," Sarah said, stepping out of her expensive SUV, her arms crossed. "Tell me you didn't buy a lame horse. I saw the post on the county auction board. 50 cents. Are you trying to make a statement?" She needed help, Sarah. That's all. "You need help, Daddy. The roof is leaking. You could have sold your old tractor. You can't afford to rescue a horse that's already half dead." Sarah's voice broke, not with anger, but with fear. "I don't want to find you alone in this house one day, having given everything to an animal that was beyond saving." Carl felt the sting of her worry. "I'm not beyond saving, honey, and neither is she." Lily, however, was quiet. She wandered away from the argument, drawn by the stillness of the gray mare. She stood a few feet from the fence, her favorite fantasy novel, The Chronicles of Silverwing, clutched in her hand. She watched Carl and Ashes from the porch, observing their silent, tentative communication. Carl noticed that Ashes, usually wary of people, seemed to follow Lily with her gaze. "She looks like a princess who was turned to stone," Lily whispered. Not to Carl, but to the air, her imagination already weaving a story around the silent horse. Ashes, who was grazing quietly near the fence, stopped eating. She lifted her head, walked slowly to Lily, and gently nudged the top rail right near the little girl's shoulder. Lily gasped, then smiled. A full, brilliant smile that Carl hadn't seen on her face in months. The connection was immediate and profound. Ashes had found another person in the world who understood quiet pain and yearned for an escape from reality. Carl watched the scene, a knot of worry untangling in his chest, replaced by a fierce, protective joy. He had bought a horse for 50 cents, and in return, he was getting back a piece of his granddaughter's heart. The phone rang that evening as Carl was finishing up the chores. It wasn't his friend. It was a woman with a sharp, professional voice that screamed money and power. A voice that meant trouble. "Mr. Cartwright? My name is Evelyn Thorne. I'm calling about the mare you recently acquired. The gray one with the distinctive brand. I understand you paid a negligible amount." Carl felt a familiar coldness. "She cost me 50 cents, ma'am. And she's not assets. She's Ashes. And she's home." The voice on the phone crackled with cold, expensive authority. cutting through the comfortable, dusty silence of Carl's farmhouse kitchen. "Mr. Cartwright? My name is Evelyn Thorne. I'm calling about the mare you recently acquired, the gray one, with the distinctive brand. I understand you paid a negligible amount." Carl felt a familiar, unwelcome coldness, the dread of the world trying to reach out and claim what was sacred and fragile. "She cost me 50 cents, ma'am. And she's not assets. She's ashes. And she's home." Evelyn Thorne ignored his protest, her voice sharpening with impatience. "That ashes is actually ghosting the field. She was, until 3 years ago, one of the most promising American steeplechase champions of her generation. Ran at Saratoga, won the Grand National Prep races. Her lineage alone, a direct descendant of Secretariat on her dam's side, is worth hundreds of thousands. Her peak value was over $2 million. The brand you photographed is the private mark of the Thorncliffe Stables, Mr. Cartwright, a very powerful name in racing." Carl sank onto a wooden chair, the sheer magnitude of the lie taking his breath away. A champion, sold for 50 cents. "What happened to her?" he whispered, staring out the window at the mare, who was gently nudging Lily's hand through the fence. "A serious ligament injury sustained during a training accident. Her last owner, a man named Marcus Hill, had significant, reckless debts and a nasty gambling habit. He couldn't afford the prolonged, complex rehabilitation. He claimed the mare died of colic, collected the full insurance payout, and then illegally offloaded her into the low-end auction circuit to cover his tracks and minimize the loss from the stable." Evelyn's voice dropped, becoming a low, dangerous growl. He tried to erase her history and hide her identity. "That mare is a walking felony, Mr. Cartwright. And now, she's walking around on your farm." Carl realized the full, terrifying truth. Her lameness wasn't a flaw. It was a scar from a life that had tried to destroy her, a physical manifestation of a crime. He had bought a champion for the price of 2 quarters, and in doing so, he had become the unwitting custodian of a massive secret. Evelyn Thorne didn't wait for his response. "The injury is healed, but she needs specialized, quiet rehabilitation to avoid permanent damage. We want her back, Mr. Cartwright. We represent the insurance consortium and key silent partners of Thorncliffe. We're offering you $50,000 for the mare today. Cash. You keep the 50 cents. You sign an ironclad non-disclosure agreement that you never, ever mention the name Ghosting the Field or Marcus Hill again. Think about it, Mr. Cartwright. 50,000 could replace that battered Ford of yours, pay for the new roof Sarah is worried about, and give you the peace of mind you deserve." Carl looked at his hands that were capable of holding a horse steady, but had never held $50,000 in cash. It was a fortune. It was the security his worried daughter, Sarah, always begged him to find. It was a chance to escape the financial anxiety that had become his constant companion since Clara's passing. He gripped the phone until his knuckles went white, his internal battle a raging storm. $50,000, or one horse's trust. He looked out at Ashes, who was now resting her chin gently on Lily's shoulder. He saw the quiet peace in her eyes, the first he had earned. He remembered the humiliation in the auction ring, the fire of fear. "Ma'am," Carl said, his voice slow and firm, infused with the quiet authority of a man who had made his peace with his choices. "You don't get it. You paid for a life. You tried to erase it. I paid for a promise. Ashes is not for sale, not for 50,000, not for 500,000. She earned her name. You can call her Ghosting the Field, but she's Ashes here. She belongs to 50 cents worth of trust. Good day." He hung up, the abruptness of the action leaving a stinging silence in the kitchen. He dropped the phone onto the hay bale and walked out to the pasture, burying his face in her warm, dusty mane. The tears he had fought back at the auction finally came, hot and messy. He was crying for her lost years, for Clara, and for the sudden, terrifying joy of finding a purpose more important than money. The following morning, the calls intensified. Evelyn Thorne stopped being polite. She sent a legal representative, a nervous young lawyer in a suit, to the farm who handed Carl a thick, intimidating cease and desist order and a threat of a lawsuit for harboring stolen property. "Mr. Cartwright," the lawyer stammered, looking nervously at the old farmhouse, "this mare is a liability. You need to be pragmatic. Thorncliffe Stables is serious. They will bankrupt you." "Tell Thorncliffe," Carl said, cleaning his worn leather boots with a rag, "that I am an old man with nothing left to lose. And the only thing I care about is the dignity of this animal. My horse cost 50 cents. That's what I'll lose. They stand to lose the truth." The threat forced Carl to finally reach out to his daughter, Sarah, and tell her the whole unbelievable story. Sarah arrived later that day, pale and furious, not at her father, but at the injustice of the situation. "Daddy, this is insane. We can't fight a stable like Thorncliffe," Sarah whispered, clutching his arm. "They have lawyers on retainer. You need legal counsel. We need to protect you." "I don't need protection, Sarah. Ashes does. And besides," Carl added, a rare, sly grin touching his lips, "they can't sue me for owning a horse that only cost me 50 cents. What's the damages? 50 cents plus maybe $500 for feet? It's not worth their time unless they want the secret out." Sarah agreed to help, but her concern was deep. She found a small, empathetic pro bono lawyer who specialized in animal law. The lawyer advised Carl to double down on the unwanted horse narrative and simply ignore the cease and desist. "Let them prove she's stolen property when they reported her dead," the lawyer advised. "The only thing they fear is the exposure of the insurance fraud." The conflict, however, had an unexpected effect on Lily. She overheard the whispers about the horse being worth millions and the threats of lawsuits. Instead of being scared, she became fierce. Lily started spending every waking moment with Ashes. She would sit by the fence and read aloud to the mare from her fantasy books, choosing passages about loyalty, courage, and dragons, creatures who were judged by their appearance but held untold power. "They think you're just a broken farm horse, Ashes," Lily would whisper, stroking the mare's silvery muzzle. "But you're ghosting the field. You're the horse of legend." Carl found that Ash's physical recovery was inextricably linked to Lily's presence. Carl started the slow, meticulous work of physical therapy. He applied liniment and gentle massage to her damaged ligament, following an old vet's advice. The key was motion without strain. Every morning, Carl, in his signature checkered shirt and overalls, would lead Ashes for a slow walk down the dirt roads surrounding the farm. It was a tedious process, demanding endless patience. The gait was a halting, three-legged shamble at first. Carl talked constantly during these walks, pouring out his heart to the silent animal. He talked about Clara, how they met at a county dance, how she smelled of cinnamon and hope, and how the silence of the farm had become unbearable since she left. Ashes would just listen, her breathing steady, her ears swiveling slightly, her body language gradually shifting from cringing tension to quiet, grounded connection. "I miss her, girl," Carl confessed one morning, his voice cracking as they walked past the overgrown rose bushes Clara had tended. "I miss having a reason to get up before the sun." Ashes stopped. She turned her head, pressed her muzzle firmly into Carl's chest, and gave a long, soft nicker. It was a communication of empathy, of deep understanding. Carl wept openly for a moment, his grief finally acknowledged by a living creature. Carl was healing her leg, yes, with gentle exercise and patience, but she was healing him too. He wasn't just Carl the widower anymore. He was Carl, the man who saved a life. Lily often joined these walks, reading her book, walking slowly and deliberately to keep pace with the mare's uneven gait. As the weeks turned into a month, the gait began to change. The limp never vanished. It was a permanent injury, but it smoothed out. It became less of a break and more of a rhythm, a distinctive, powerful skip seamlessly integrated into her stride. One day, Carl was walking her down the road when a pair of local teenage boys sped past in a beat-up truck, yelling a crude comment about the old man and his broken horse. Ashes didn't flinch. She stopped, lifted her head high, her muscles bunching, and simply watched the truck disappear in the dust. It was an act of profound self-possession, of realized power. Carl felt a surge of pride so intense it made him dizzy. The physical recovery was impressive, but the trust was everything. Carl soon discovered that Ashes had an almost magical understanding of his emotional state. If he was anxious about the mail or the bills, she would become restless. If he was calm and humming, she would rest her head on his shoulder and sigh contentedly. Their hearts were now beating in tandem, two souls reclaimed from the discard pile. The healing of Ashes was slow, but the healing of the Cartwright family was faster. Sarah stopped worrying about the money and started worrying about the horse. She bought specialized feed, looked up articles on equine massage, and even began riding one of the quiet neighbor horses herself. Lily was transformed. She was outgoing, confident, and fierce in her defense of the mare. She stopped reading about fantasy heroes. She had found one on her own farm. The conflict with Evelyn Thorne, however, had only simmered, not stopped. The lawyer, Thorne, was smart. She realized a lawsuit would expose the fraud. Instead, she began a subtle war of attrition. Carl started finding expensive veterinary bills left in his mailbox, bills for specialized thoroughbred care he hadn't requested. He found flyers posted in town anonymously, warning the community that the gray horse was unstable and potentially violent. Thorne was determined to make Carl's life so miserable, so expensive, that he would beg her to take the horse and the money. Carl's savings dwindled under the pressure of the unnecessary expenses he felt compelled to pay just to keep the peace. The threat was no longer legal, it was existential. The conflict with Evelyn Thorne had settled into a grim, expensive routine. The threats of lawsuits had subsided, replaced by a constant trickle of harassment designed to bleed Carl dry. Carl's small savings were indeed dwindling under the pressure of unnecessary but compelling expenditures, paying for specialized, unneeded hay delivered from a suspicious company, fixing fences mysteriously cut, and dealing with the occasional visit from a zealous county official reporting a health code violation, clearly instigated by Thorne's persistent efforts. Carl was worn down, not by the work, but by the relentless psychological war. He often found himself standing by the pasture gate at night, rubbing the mare's silky neck, whispering, "They won't win, girl. They won't take your peace." Ashes, in turn, seemed to understand the gravity of the situation. Her training was not about speed or obedience. It was about trust and stability. Carl had discovered that she responded best to consistency and ritual. Every afternoon, Lily would join them. Lily, once a shy, anxious girl, now walked with a noticeable confidence, her long, dark hair pulled back in a braid, leaving her fantasy books behind, in favor of a leather notebook where she meticulously tracked Ash's progress, recording her gait symmetry and heart rate. "Grandpa," Lily announced one day, tapping her pencil against the notebook. "Her stride is 85% normal now. The limp is just a hesitation, not a weakness. It's like a comma in a very long, strong sentence." Carl smiled, a real, genuine smile that reached his eyes, a smile that Clara used to love. A comma. "I like that, Lil." A pause before the next gallop. The farm became a haven. Sarah, exhausted by city life and the corporate fight, began visiting every weekend, using the quiet, steady presence of Carl and Ashes as a form of therapy. Jed, the gruff neighbor, slowly became an ally, occasionally dropping off extra bales of premium hay just because. He never mentioned the 50 cents, but he always greeted Ashes with a respectful nod and a quiet, "How's the champ today, Carl?" But the peace was an illusion, a fragile bubble soon to burst. Late in August, the drought that had plagued the county finally culminated in disaster. A massive forest fire, started by a dry lightning storm miles away in the remote Black Canyon Preserve, was racing eastward, driven by unseasonable, erratic winds. The air began to thicken with the pungent smell of burnt pine and the swirling white of ash. Evacuation orders were issued for the entire western half of the county. Carl, panicked, rushed to Jed's feed store to borrow a second trailer for his few remaining livestock. He had only a single stall trailer suitable for Ashes, He needed a stock trailer for the 2 old dairy cows he kept and the couple of pigs. "Carl, you're too old for this," Jed yelled, sweating and frantic as he hitched the trailer. "The fire jumped the river 2 hours ago. You need to go, now." "I can't leave them, Jed. They rely on me." Carl raced back to the farm. Sarah and Lily had already packed their car, the trunk overflowing with necessary supplies and Lily's precious notebook. They were waiting anxiously, their faces smeared with ash. "Daddy, we have to go, now!" Sarah pleaded, her voice high with fear. "The radio says the roads might be closed within the hour." Carl's heart pounded a terrible rhythm against his ribs. He hitched the large stock trailer, secured the cows and pigs, and ran to the pasture for Ashes, intending to lead her to the single-horse trailer. But when he reached the gate, his stomach dropped with a sickening lurch. He had forgotten to properly secure the latch in his initial panic. The small gate to the main pasture was ajar. Ashes was gone. "The gate! She's out! I have to find her!" Carl grabbed a bridle and a powerful flashlight, ignoring Sarah's desperate, tearful pleas. "Daddy, don't be a fool! The embers are falling! You'll die out there!" Sarah screamed, clutching the fence post, her practical fear overwhelming her. "She's counting on me!" Carl shouted back, already running toward the plume of smoke rising over his western pasture. "I promised her safety! I promised her freedom!" He ran through the scattering of trees near the barn, calling her name until his throat was raw. "Ashes, ghosting the field. Come on, girl." He heard a faint, high-pitched cry that wasn't Ashes. It was human. "Grandpa." Carl changed direction instantly, crashing through the brittle brush. He found her not in the burning forest, but standing rigidly at the edge of the woods, her silver coat glowing terrifyingly in the reflected orange light. But she wasn't alone. Huddled against her flank, her small face streaked with soot and tears, eyes wide with raw terror, was Lily. Lily, who had run back into the small copse of woods behind the barn to retrieve her dropped fantasy book. The one with the legend of the Silverwing, had gotten disoriented by the thick, swirling smoke. Ashes, driven by an instinct no one knew she possessed, had tracked the child by scent, reaching her just as the fire's roar became deafening. The mare was positioned as a living shield, using her massive body to protect the fragile girl from the embers and the choking smoke. Carl rushed to them, his heart an exploding drum. "Lily! My God!" He scooped his terrified granddaughter into his arms, kissing her face, his relief so intense it felt like physical pain. "Grandpa, Ashes found me," Lily gasped, clutching his neck. She told me to be still. As Carl turned to run back toward the farm, ready to fight his way through the flames, Ashes gave a deep, urgent whicker, then turned and began to move. Not toward the house, which was still in the fire's path, but toward the abandoned old fire break deep in the woods, a hidden trail Carl hadn't used since he and Clara used to ride horses there 20 years ago. She knows the way, Carl realized, utterly stunned. She knows the safest path. The mare, the horse sold for 50 cents, led them through the choking, burning woods, her lame leg beating out a steady, powerful rhythm that somehow reassured them both. She moved with the speed and precision of the champion she once was, her instincts taking over. She navigated fallen logs and smoking underbrush, ignoring the stinging embers and the panic. She led them through the terrifying chaos of the burning forest until she delivered them, safe and gasping, to the old, overgrown firebreak road where Jed was waiting with the truck and trailer, watching the horizon in terror. "Carl, I thought you were gone!" Jed cried, running to them as they stumbled out of the smoke. Sarah, who had been seconds from driving away to save herself, collapsed in relief, pulling Lily into a fierce embrace. Ashes stood panting, smoke-stained, and utterly exhausted, but triumphant. She had not only saved the girl, she had given Carl and his daughter an undeniable, tangible reason to believe in the purest kind of miracle. The crisis passed. The fire was contained just short of Carl's property, halted by the old, forgotten fire break Ashes had led them to. When the smoke cleared, the community was changed. Carl and Ashes were no longer just a curiosity. They were heroes. Jed's feed store started collecting donations for the miracle mare. The story, the 50-cent horse, the hidden champion, the heroic rescue, was now firmly cemented in local legend. And then, a new letter arrived. It wasn't from Evelyn Thorne, but from Marcus Hill's former stable manager, a man named Thomas, who had always loved Ashes. He had heard the story on the local news. The letter was simple. "Mr. Cartwright, I heard about the fire. I know you're the only chance she has. I also know that Evelyn Thorne is trying to buy every scrap of evidence linking Ashes to Thorncliffe to protect her former client. She's attending the county fair steeplechase next month to scout for new talent. It's the perfect time to make a statement. Don't hide her. Show her. Her papers are worthless, but her heart is golden. You have to let the world see Ghosting the Field run free one last time." Carl looked at Ashes, who was resting in the cool, safe barn, her silvery coat still carrying the faint scent of smoke. Her leg was strong, her spirit was unbroken, and her heart was devoted. He looked at the local fair flyer pinned to his fridge. The 75th Annual County Fair Steeplechase. He knew what he had to do. The final confrontation would not be fought with lawyers or threats, but with freedom and truth. The story of Carl and Ashes was no longer just local gossip. It had become a quiet legend. Jed helped Carl repair the fire damage, and Sarah set up a small, transparent fund that allowed the community to donate towards the mayor's upkeep, all managed by Lily, who treated the ledger like a sacred text. Evelyn Thorne's efforts to discredit Carl had backfired spectacularly. Every negative flyer she printed was quickly covered by a grateful poster featuring Lily drawing a picture of a mighty, silvery horse. Carl read the letter from Thomas, the former stable manager, dozens of times. "Show her run free, one last time." The weight of the suggestion was immense. Ash's injury was stable, but a full-speed steeplechase race could re-injure her, and more importantly, betray the quiet trust he had spent months building. But hiding her felt like letting the darkness win. If they were to define her, they would define her by her freedom, not by her market value or her broken past. Carl began the preparation immediately, but it was unconventional. He didn't train Ashes to race against the clock, he trained her to celebrate. "We aren't running to win, girl," Carl murmured, leading her into the woods a week before the fair. "We're running to tell the truth." He spent hours polishing her coat until the gray shone like silver in the sunlight. Lily spent days carefully braiding the mare's mane, weaving in soft red ribbons, the same color as the little scarf Clara used to wear. The small, private ceremony was their act of defiance. Carl also prepared for Evelyn Thorne. He knew she would be there, waiting for a legal misstep or an opportunity for public humiliation. He asked Sarah to be ready with the pro bono lawyer, and he put Lily in charge of the most crucial element, the simple, final statement. On the day of the 75th Annual County Fair Steeplechase, the atmosphere was electric. The local papers had all run stories about the miracle mare, and the crowd was the largest the fair had seen in decades. The formal, expensive world of thoroughbred racing had collided with the dusty, genuine world of local farmers. Carl and Ashes were the talk of the small crowd. Ashes stood near the entrance, radiant and calm, her muscles rippling beneath her silvery coat. Carl wore his best, cleanest set of denim overalls and his favorite checkered shirt, a uniform of humble, unshakable integrity. They weren't registered to run, but Carl led her slowly, proudly, into the center of the dusty arena as the announcer introduced the high-stakes final heat. And there she was. Standing by the announcer's booth, cold and immaculate in a tailored cream suit, was Evelyn Thorne. She held a microphone in one hand and a thick folder in the other, evidence of a prepared public statement. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a highly irregular situation," the announcer boomed, clearly nervous. Evelyn Thorne snatched the microphone from him. Her voice, sharp and amplified, cut through the buzzing crowd. "Attention! I am Evelyn Thorne, legal representative of the Thorncliffe Stables Consortium. I am here to make a final offer and a public warning. The gray mare, currently known as Ashes, is a dangerous liability. She is a former champion, Ghosting the Field, whose past owner committed felony insurance fraud by reporting her deceased. Running her is illegal, unethical, and incredibly irresponsible due to her permanent injury. Carl Cartwright, I am now offering you $250,000 cash to hand her over to a safe sanctuary immediately. Take the money, old man, or I will use the law to seize her and publicly expose your complicity." Carl walked slowly to the loudspeaker, his voice firm and steady, holding the full, quiet authority of a man who had faced down a fire and conquered grief. "Folks, this is Ashes. 6 months ago, she was sold for 50 cents because the world thought she was broken and worthless." He held up his hand, silencing the murmurs. "The lady is right about one thing. She is a champion who was abandoned, a champion who proved her courage by saving my granddaughter's life in a fire, and a champion who taught me that a life is never worthless, no matter the price tag." Carl looked directly at Evelyn Thorne, his kind eyes suddenly blazing with cold clarity. "Ma'am, you came here to buy a secret. I came here to set a soul free. The price of this horse is still 50 cents, and she's not for sale." He turned to the high timber jumps, the obstacles that had defined Ash's painful past. Then, in a moment of sublime final trust, he unclipped her lead rope and let it fall to the dust. He stepped back. Ashes was free. Evelyn Thorne was shouting into the dead microphone, "Stop! This is madness! Call the police!" But no one was listening. Ashes looked at the jumps, then at Carl, who stood still, his heart exposed. Carl simply raised his hand. Not a whip, not a command, just an open palm of permission. Ashes understood. Suddenly, she broke into a trot, a beautiful, flowing motion that stunned the audience into silence. The limp was barely a skip, a syncopated rhythm seamlessly integrated into her powerful stride. She ran toward the first jump, a massive 5-foot timber fence, and cleared it with a powerful, breathtaking arc of silver and muscle. She didn't race. She performed a ballet of liberation. She sailed over the 7 major obstacles on the course, not for speed, but for joy and defiance. She ran the entire track, not as a competitor, but as a masterpiece, demonstrating her redemption, her every movement telling the silent, powerful story of a soul reclaimed. When she finished the last jump, the crowd erupted in a cacophony of tears and applause. But Ashes didn't stop at the finish line. She slowed to a magnificent, effortless canter, and instead of taking a victory lap, she trotted right back to Carl, stopping nose to chest, and nickered softly. Carl wrapped his arms around her neck, tears streaming down his weathered cheeks and soaking into her silvery mane. "That's it, girl," he whispered, his voice catching. "You won. You're finally free." Evelyn Thorne, defeated, simply turned and walked away. The secret was out. The fraud was exposed, and the truth had triumphed over greed. In that moment, everyone saw it. The old man and the unwanted horse, 2 broken souls who found everything they needed in 50 cents worth of trust. Carl's life didn't just change, it was reborn. He was no longer a lonely widower, but the celebrated guardian of a true legend. He had saved a champion, and in doing so, she had saved his heart, given his granddaughter confidence, and reminded an entire community that the greatest treasures are often found in the things the world discards. Carl never raced Ashes again. He simply walked with her every morning, the two of them, a familiar, quiet silhouette against the rising sun. Ashes lived out her days on the farm, a loving silver shadow always near Carl or Lily. Her story, the $50 miracle, was printed in Lily's notebook, passed down in the community, and became the final, beautiful chapter in the life of Carl Cartwright, the farmer who knew the true value of a forgotten soul.